Most parents in this situation are running two campaigns at once: reduce the screens, and separately, help with the anxiety. And both campaigns keep stalling at roughly the same point. Because the assumption underneath both of them is that these are two separate problems. They're not. The anxiety and the screen use are one cycle. They feed each other in a specific, documentable way. And once you can see the cycle as one thing, one mechanism with one entry point, one thing is all you need to interrupt. That's what this video is actually about. Not the screens, not the anxiety, the loop between them, and why seeing it clearly changes everything about what you try next. Start here. Your child comes home from school. Maybe something happened. A social moment that went wrong, a test they're dreading, an interaction they can't stop replaying. Maybe nothing specific happened. Just the accumulated weight of a day spent managing a nervous system that runs a little hotter than average. They walk through the door, and they go directly to the screen. Here is what that looks like from the outside. A child who prefers a device to their family. A child who is choosing disconnection. Here is what it actually is. A child whose nervous system is flooded, and who has learned, reliably, that one thing brings the flood down fast. This is what self-regulation looks like in a child who is anxious and hasn't yet developed the internal tools to manage that arousal alone. Not laziness, not preference. A nervous system finding the fastest available path to relief. The research on anxiety and avoidance behavior is consistent on this point. When a child discovers that a specific behavior reliably lowers distress, that behavior gets reinforced, not because the child chose it consciously, but because the nervous system remembered. Screens work fast, every time. And in a brain that is already running on high alert, fast and reliable is not a preference. It's a survival strategy. This is not a verdict on your child. It is not a verdict on you. It is what it looks like when a child is anxious and hasn't yet found a regulation tool that works as quickly as the one in their hand. And it is the beginning of understanding why this keeps getting harder, not easier, the longer it goes on. Now let's look at what happens when the screen becomes that go-to solution. The screen relieves the anxiety short-term. Genuinely. The arousal comes down. The nervous system settles. For that hour, or 2 hours, or 3, your child is not in distress, but something else is happening at the same time. The first mechanism is sleep. Anxiety already disrupts sleep. The ruminating mind, the racing thoughts, the body that won't settle. Screens in the evening, particularly the light exposure and the stimulation of social content, push that disruption further. And sleep deprivation, across every study that has looked at it, directly amplifies anxiety the following day. So the screen that relieved the anxiety at 9 p.m. has made the anxiety worse by 8 a.m. The child who needed the regulation tool yesterday needs it more today. And the cycle tightens. The second mechanism is social. Anxious children often use screens to avoid the social situations that trigger their anxiety in the first place. The birthday party becomes optional. The group project is managed by text. The hallway interaction gets replaced by a message. And every avoided situation, every time the nervous system was spared the discomfort of a real social encounter, makes the next real encounter feel slightly more impossible. This is called avoidance reinforcement. And it is one of the most well-documented cycles in anxiety research. The more a child avoids what makes them anxious, the more powerful the anxiety around that thing becomes. The screen is not just filling time. It is building a wall between your child and the experiences that would, over time, have taught their nervous system that it could cope. So you have 3 mechanisms running simultaneously. The screen relieves anxiety short-term. It disrupts the sleep that would have regulated anxiety overnight. And it enables the avoidance that makes the social world feel increasingly threatening. You already know something is wrong. Now you know why the two things you're watching, the anxiety and the screens, aren't running parallel. They're running in a circle. But here's what matters most. Every loop has a beginning. And this one did not start with the screen. It started earlier, in the gradual, invisible, entirely understandable process by which the screen became the fastest available source of relief for a child who was overwhelmed. Think about what that means. Before the screen, something else was the fastest available source of relief. When a young child is flooded, frightened, overstimulated, sad, confused, they reach for a person, not because they were trained to, because the attachment system, the neurological architecture of human connection, is designed to use relationship as its primary regulation tool. The research on this is not new. Developmental psychology has documented it for decades. A regulated caregiver, present, consistent, emotionally available, is the original co-regulation device. Long before there were screens, there was a parent and a child, and the nervous system of one settling inside the presence of the other. What changed, slowly through 1,000 ordinary moments, is that the screen became more immediately available than that presence. Not because the love disappeared, because the world got faster and louder and more demanding. And at some point, a lit screen in a child's hand was, for a few minutes, easier than what genuine presence would have required from both of you. This is not a confession. This is what it looks like when two overwhelmed systems, a child's and an adult's, find the path of least resistance at the same moment. But here is what this tells us about the loop. The screen is not the destination. It is the detour. And a detour only holds as long as the original road feels impassable. The anxiety is real. The screen use is real. But underneath both of them is something that came first. A child whose nervous system learned to reach sideways because reaching toward was not, in that moment, the fastest available path. This is not a verdict on your child. Not on you, it is a direction. Because if the loop began in the regulation relationship, the exit from the loop is in the same place. Not in the screen limit, not in the anxiety treatment running separately from everything else. In the gradual, patient, specific work of becoming the regulation resource your child's nervous system can reach for again. That is not a soft idea. That is what the attachment science actually shows. Reducing screens without rebuilding the regulation relationship is like removing a splint before the bone has healed. The pain doesn't go away. It just no longer has anything holding it. If what this video opened is something you want to take further, there is a 30-day guided framework in the description built specifically around relational repair. Not screen management, the connection underneath it, grounded in attachment psychology, designed for exactly the emotional state this video describes. It's there when you're ready. So what does interrupting this loop actually look like in practice? An integrated approach does not start with the screen. It starts with a question: when is my child's nervous system most available to me? Not most compliant, not most regulated, most available, even slightly. Even briefly. For some children, it's the car. Side by side, no eye contact required, nowhere to go. For others, it's right after school, before the device goes on, when the day's tension is still close enough to the surface that it can actually be named. For others, it's much later. The quieter hours, when the defenses soften slightly. You already know the moments. You've felt them. The ones where your child is briefly less defended, where something could pass between you if you knew what to do with it. The intervention is not a conversation about screens. It is not a conversation about anxiety. It is a series of small moments in which you are reliably, calmly, non-demandingly present when your child's nervous system is activated. Not solving it. Not explaining it. Being the thing that does not require the screen to manage. The research on co-regulation is specific here. A child's nervous system does not calm because it was told to. It calms because it finds proximity to a regulated nervous system. Yours. And that is not a skill you have to acquire. You already know how to be calm beside your child. The screen made it seem like that was no longer enough. This is what it looks like when it starts to be enough again. A note on clinical anxiety, because this objection deserves a direct answer. If your child is already working with a therapist, a pediatrician, a professional, this does not compete with that. Therapy and medication, where they're appropriate, work on the neurological side of the loop. Relational repair works on the behavioral and attachment side. They are not the same intervention, and they are not in conflict. A child can be supported clinically and relationally at the same time. In fact, the research on anxiety treatment outcomes consistently shows that children with strong relational support respond better and hold progress longer. This is why removing the screen on its own tends to spike the anxiety rather than relieve it. You remove the regulation tool without replacing it. The nervous system goes back to the state it was in before it found the detour. The goal is not to take something away. It is to make something else more available. One moment, on an ordinary evening, where your child's nervous system found what it needed somewhere other than a screen. That is the first degree of change. That is where the loop begins to loosen. The framework for doing that, specifically over 30 days in small increments, is in the description, not a screen management protocol. The relational work underneath it, whenever you're ready to go there. When you look at your child on a screen, what do you actually feel? And which part of this video named that feeling most accurately? What you came in with was a pattern you couldn't explain. Two things you were watching: the anxiety climbing, the screen use climbing, and the persistent exhausting sense that every time you addressed one, the other got worse. That wasn't a misreading. That was the loop, exactly as it runs. What you're leaving with is the mechanism. Not as a diagnosis, not as a verdict, as a map. The loop began in a relationship. Not because the relationship failed, because relationships are where nervous systems go for relief. And when the relationship became harder to access than a screen, through no single decision, through no single failure, the screen became the next closest thing. This is what it looks like from inside the brain. Not a moral problem, a design problem. And design problems have exits. The child who is reaching for the screen is still reaching. That is not a small thing. That is the attachment system doing exactly what it was built to do. Looking for regulation, looking for relief, looking for a nervous system that can hold what theirs cannot yet hold alone. You watched this video because something in you already knew these two things were connected? That intuition was correct. And now you have more than intuition. You have the mechanism. What you know now is the beginning of the framework. Not the whole path, but the difference between standing in the dark and having something to hold. The screen was never the destination, it was the detour. And the road it was avoiding, it was always you. That's not a small thing, that's where everything else starts.